My dad witnessed a ghost at his work. True story. Okay, so my dad has always been that type of guy, but he doesn't believe in anything unless he's witnessed it for himself. He's a pretty macho guy and isn't into all that fairy tale and ghost nonsense. Yet all that changed for him one day. It was about 2:30 in the afternoon when my dad came home. He works the night shift at the old El Reno prison. He says it's a pretty laid-back job for the most part. He usually drive around the prison in one of the guard trucks or keep watching the towers. But one night, he was sent to do a sweep of the chapel, to make sure no one was in there who wasn't supposed to be. His boss, let's call him Jack, told him to come back and check in with him after he'd done it. My dad walked through the yard out to the chapel, and as soon as he walked in, he said he felt just a wave of nervousness come over him. He flicked on the old lights and walked in and began to check all around the room. After about a couple of minutes, he said a man, dressed in the same uniform as him, walked out from the little office in the back. My dad asked the man if he was already doing the sweep of the chapel, and the man replied, "Yeah, I'll take it from here." So, confused as to why he was sent out there to check the chapel, my dad just gave a little, "Oh, okay, I'll let Jack know." My dad returned to his boss about 15 minutes after he had sent him. Jack looked at him and asked, "How did you get done so fast? You couldn't have possibly checked the whole place in such a short amount of time. Another guard's already in there. He said he'd check it," my dad said. And I guess Jack didn't think anything of it. As long as the chapel was checked, everything was fine with him. Well, this is where it gets really creepy. About 3 days after, my dad said he was walking down the halls of the prison and stopped to look in the display case of all the old photos of other guards in the past. As he was browsing the photos, he said his heart sank and his blood froze. One of the pictures he came across was the very same guard he had encountered in the chapel, only this guard was dead. Apparently about 4 years before my dad started working there, a riot had broken out in the chapel and a guard was stabbed to death, and that guard was the same man my dad had seen in the chapel. But after 12 years of working there, not once had he ever heard about the riot until now. I don't know if they just don't talk about it, scared it might run off some of the newbies, or if it's just something a lot of them had forgot about. All I can say is, my dad is now a firm believer in the paranormal, and not once has he ever gone back into that creepy chapel. No one believes. True story. I remember when I was around the age of 4, my family and I lived in a small apartment on the 4th floor, which was pretty high. The apartment was full of people like drug addicts and other low-life criminals. There were no other kids in the unit, so I mainly spent my time playing with toys. One night, after my mother turned off the lights for bedtime, the whole family went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night around 2 a.m. I was pretty thirsty, so I was going to grab a cup of water from the kitchen. But as I was pulling off my blanket, I heard noises. Noises coming from the other side of the house. Being a stupid toddler, I didn't think anything of it. So I got up and walked out of my room. The moon was lighting up the room through the open sliding door to the veranda. But then I came to the terrifying realization that the sliding door was supposed to be closed. I knew this because I was the one who closed it before bed. But at that moment, I heard those noises again, and they were coming from the kitchen. I put 2 and 2 together and realized that someone was in the house. I tried tiptoeing to my parents' room, but I looked behind me, and what I saw scared me. It was a man in a costume. He looked at me and grabbed me. He was pulling my hair and putting his hand on my mouth, but I broke out of his grip and ran to my mother's room. I was too scared to say anything. The next morning, I told my mother everything. She told me it was all just a wild nightmare. I tried to tell my dad, but he said the same. Only I know what happened, but no one believes me. I will never forget the sack that he wore over his head. And the thing that still bothers me is how did he manage to get to the 4th floor? The door was locked, and so were the windows. So, did he climb the entire building? And if he did, why me? My true story. I saw a ghost in my bedroom. True story. Just to let readers know, I'm female. It was Thursday and I had an alarm set for 6 a.m. because I had school. I woke to my alarm blasting in my ear, so I grabbed my phone to turn it off. I was awake now and was glued to the bed, so I decided to go on Instagram. And that's when I saw it. Someone standing 1 foot away from me. My vision was a bit blurry, but I could see what she was wearing. She had long hair and a nightgown with flowers, and her legs were so pale. She was in front of my brother's bed, swaying side to side gently while looking at me. I was paralysed. I couldn't move. I went under my covers and started rubbing my eyes. When I accidentally scratched myself, that's when I realised I wasn't dreaming. I pulled my covers off and she was still there. All I could do was call for my brother's name. For my brother's privacy, we'll just call him Jack. I whispered while crying, "Jack, use your flashlight." I said this about 5 or 6 times while crying louder. He heard me on the 6th time and he woke up and grabbed his flashlight. That's when she just vanished. My dog woke up. I was still scared and crying. I told my brother what happened and I still went to school. When I came back, I told my mum, and what she said still chills me to the bone. She said a woman had died in our house and she used to live with her son. When she died, her son moved away, and so my mum rented the house. I'm no longer comfortable being in this house.